boys, bobbins, and acorns to another episode of Ignore the Bird, Follow the River's Willow Watch.
I'm Adam. This is Weston. We kick ass and we love Willow.
We love Willow. Yeah, Willow is one of the more important films in my life. Willow contains some really radical themes that really helped influence and inform my perspective as a person. And I've talked about those themes in no short amount during the course of our Ignore the Bird, Follow the River program here. First of all, we're going to talk more about the reveal for Scorpia, the Children of Kale, the Bone Reavers. We're going to talk about that more in detail at the end of the episode, so that so that we can get through the bulk of this ostensibly filler episode. So I guess let's get right into it, my friend.
Sure. Absolutely. So yeah. I kind of like how they hit the ground running, like we haven't seen that yet in an episode. And it kind of reminds me of a lot of Dan Harmon's sort of themes, or not necessarily themes, but structure that he uses in his various franchises. Like you have to have these types of episodes leading up to this type of episode, and so on and so forth in the story circle. But like, there's always got to be an episode that, be it filler though it may be, like you hit the ground running. It's almost like a cold open, even though it kind of really isn't, because but like it forces you to like focus and pay attention right away, because there's so much fucking action right away. And I like that intro. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Maybe this is, again, I'm trying not to get into this nitpicky stuff, but I like this song. I like it quite a bit, actually. But the thing is it undercuts this tension that was worked so hard for, you can tell, in the shot setups and the way that they choreographed this scene. If you replaced it with maybe some of the action sequence score from the previous film, I think it has a very different vibe to it. That is much more tense, is much more of a chase sequence, and much less a kind of Scooby-Doo like run away from the scary monsters kind of beat. I can understand from a storytelling perspective wanting to maybe not start your episode off with this heavy note. It could have been done very simply by adding in a couple of shots of the DAG, the flying gale.
Yeah, I agree.
Maybe flying above in bird form, these big overhead establishing shots before we get into that chase sequence, regardless of what music. But I do think that without a score that matches the tense and frightening kind of vibe that this moment deserves, essentially, I do think that it undercuts that tension, and it is a little bit frustrating for me. Yeah,
I agree with that. I'm glad you mentioned that too, because throughout the series, like one of my main sticking points is like, and I've kind of grown reserved to the fact that it's going to happen, like the modern music at the end. But really, until this episode, we haven't had modern music throughout, and that's like, I agree with you. I feel like an orchestral, draw something from the old themes from the movie and things like that would much better serve that purpose. And the modern music kind of takes me out of it, because then I'm like, as soon as I hear it, I'm like, oh, this is like neo punk. What is this? Who's the artist? Like it, because my brain goes 1,000 miles a minute, and as soon as I hear something new, especially new music, I'm like, oh, do I know this? Is this a cover? What is this? And I get into I immediately Shazam it, and so it definitely takes me out of the moment, Whereas, like you said, like the orchestral score can do everything you need and keep you held within that moment, you know? So I wholeheartedly agree with you on that. Absolutely.
Yeah. It makes me ask, what are we supposed to be feeling here?
Yeah.
And I think that
So is
was
this
a question that
Willow, or
they
is it the
weren't asking
CW?
themselves.
Yeah. Sorry. I'm like, also, is this Willow or is it the CW?
I've heard that criticism levied against this show a number of times already, and I've never really watched a CW show, so
Oh,
I wouldn't necessarily have that point of reference. But it does, yeah, it isn't. I Yeah, it's not necessarily what I think serves the story and that moment. It
yeah.
doesn't. I don't feel it does it necessarily very much. It doesn't necessarily give it justice for all of the
Yeah.
hard work that went into the set and costume design, the choreography. It just feels like kind of like there's all of this set up. If you turn that scene off, turn the sound off on that scene, and you watch it, it doesn't feel like what the music is trying to tell us. It feels like, and it's uh, incongruent in that way. And I feel like
Yeah.
they could have served the material a little bit better.
Totally.
Um,
As I was watching this, though, I found myself asking a question that I didn't mind asking, which was, where are they at this point? Like, did the Gales wait until they got a little ways away and start like hounding them, or is this right straight out of Nockmar? Because it's clearly ruins of a castle. It's more of a grassy area. There's because the front door of Nockmar Castle is kind of gravelly and sandy and like sparse. But the other thing is these ruins remind me of the ruins of Tirazleen when they first went there in the original film. So it's kind of, I don't know if that was intentional to sort of give you that nostalgic feeling of that sort of a battle scene, but yeah, I'm just wondering, is this straight out of Nockmar? Where is this?
Absolutely. I also the dag. Willow hits her with that flamethrower we saw in the trailer, and
Yeah.
yet we see her again moments later.
I think, well, so like we were watching it and we were like, I paused it because I was like, oh, what's that? Because it kind of looks like they get dusted, kind of, i.e. Marvel and the Thanos snap. But I'm thinking that because like at least we know at least one of them, one of the Gales has the teleportation skill, but maybe for each individual it looks or manifests differently. Because clearly we see them in the next scene too, like we see them again, and
Yeah.
so it like they just dust themselves, and it's closer to Nightcrawler than it is like an electric sort of field that teleports you someplace, I think.
Yeah, I wrote she kind of bamps out of existence. We saw the Lich do that
Yeah.
earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, but as our heroes are making their next move, have collected back together, they all are trying to figure out their next move and decide to go into the Wildwood. Wildwood being the name of this episode.
Yes.
They mention the perils of the Wildwood, kind of hinting at this place that takes over your senses and makes you want to never leave, which we don't necessarily get. But what we do get is the idea that the Bone Reavers being that they are the inhabitants of the Wildwood, it almost appears as if, like the way that actually functions is that the Bone Reavers take people in or potentially kill them as they enter the Wildwood. We see how they're so adept at ambush that only Borman was able to see it coming, and only because it would appear because he knows them and he knows their tactics.
Yeah. I was thinking, like I had a few different thoughts on that. Like, it kind of reminded me of, how in all the various incarnations of the Robin Hood story, there's always been like stigma and just mystery about like and even fear of Sherwood Forest because ghosts and ghoulies and things like that. And like once you go in there, you can never come back. And clearly, in all those Robin Hood stories, it was just the people that lived in Sherwood Forest making those rumors and making so that people wouldn't go in the forest and fuck with them. So there was
Absolutely.
that. The other thing I was thinking of was like, because they talked about the perils of it quite a bit for quite a few lines, and I was like, oh, is this just like the writer, the director, maybe even the actors like saying, hey, can we do this little bit that are fans of Monty Python, in the Holy Grail, like, oh shit, let me go and face the peril. No, it's too perilous, like things like that. Those were I was like, oh, is this a nod to Monty Python?
Yeah, it does absolutely have that that kind of, yeah, absolutely. I totally see where you're coming from with the comparison to Robin Hood, to his merry men and whatnot. Interesting, because the Bone Reavers are much more complicated than we were initially kind of led to believe, effectively.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And we've been talking about this since their first appearances in the trailers. I thought there was enough evidence to kind of say, well, maybe things will work out differently than they're trying to point us in the direction of. There could be some gray area, even talking about them like potentially a comparison to Vlad the Impaler, and we'll get into later how that depiction is not necessarily inaccurate. We do learn a little bit about our characters before they are whisked off to the Bone Reavers. Borman talks about the perils once they enter the Wildwood. Talks about the perils as if they're doing that, like they're chores that you do for a friend you don't really want to do, kind of like implying that he already knows what they're in for. Yeah. Implying that he has a relationship with these Bone Reavers.
Yep.
But he's not talking.
Right.
We learn a little bit about Sherlindria's wand. It comes from the mother tree, or the great tree of Anduin, this kind of world tree, parallel.
The tree at the center of all things, I think, was the exact line.
Thank you. Yeah, it's also I assume this is also the same symbol that we keep seeing used for Tirzleen. This great tree.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. During that scene, I did notice something interesting. Actually, it was pointed out to me by my partner. But I've been around firearms a lot in my life, and there's one thing I learned very early on. My dad was in the service and was really his before I ever touched a weapon, he taught me a lot about firearms safe handling practices. Mm-hmm. And you never, ever, ever point a weapon at a person. And Willow, over and over again, while talking about the destructive potential for this magical item, is pointing it at Lori. Does it like 6-8 times, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I noticed that too.
Not responsible firearms handling, Willow.
No, not at all. Yeah, my dad and my grandparents were the same way. They like I even remember one point where they were like, okay, you gotta if you want to do target practice, you have to clean the gun. And and one time I was a little kid. I was like, I don't want to clean it. They're like, are you sure? And I'm like, okay, no, I don't. I'm lazy. And then they were like, okay, that's fine. And then the next time I wanted to do target practice, they were like, no. I'm like, why? And they're like, because you weren't responsible. You didn't clean the gun. You didn't respect the fact that this is an element of danger and things like that. And if you want to keep it safe, yada, yada, yada. And I was like, it hit hit home with me, and ever since then I've been, very respectful of that. And yeah. Anyway, but yeah, it just really hit home with me too. And things like that, not even just guns, but like we watch a show called Good Mythical Morning, and it's two guys that do random funny shit. And
yeah, I'm familiar.
yeah, so Link is fucking notorious for don't ever let Link handle sharp things. And like Willow reminded me of Link in that scene. And he was just like, rat, rat, rat. I'm like, oh God, take the wand away from him, please.
Allura wants the wand, and that bargaining for it is like, I almost wish there would have been a line like, "Why are you pointing this weapon at me? You're telling me how destructive this is, and you don't even, you just keep pointing this lethal fucking thing at me." You could accidentally throw together a couple of syllables totally by mistake and fucking immolate me, dog.
Right? Yeah. Like you threw yourself up into a tree in the film.
Yeah, exactly. Like you should know better.
Yep.
But yeah, we learn more about Willow and Allura, kind of going over the learning the training of Allura's abilities, magical abilities. She has the line, "We cured Graydon probably." So there is some ambiguity. I didn't think there was at the end of the last episode any ambiguity there. I thought it was clear that Allura exercised whatever demon, potentially Allura and Allura's innate magical gifts, as well as the ritual they had performed. But I thought there was no ambiguity there. I thought it was fairly clear that, the demon was sucked out and up. But
I thought so too.
I guess at least Allura is questioning, and Willow doesn't propose any kind of counter to her statement that it might not be completely out of him.
Right.
Which, I don't know. I don't necessarily I don't have to like it, and I don't.
Well, I think maybe there definitely could be some trauma there, because especially with Allura and Willow. Like Willow doesn't necessarily say yes or no, but so he doesn't necessarily agree or disagree, but they were the focus of Graydon's demon that possessed him, the lich. So, there's definitely going to be some trauma there. They're like, even though maybe they have sucked it all out of him, but they're still a bit wary of it because, they had to go through that and none of the other people did in their party, So I think that's pretty understandable.
We also we get a little bit of Willow and Allura's kind of dynamic, a little bit better than we have previously. Especially knowing what has happened we don't know the whole story yet, but we know that Kaya and Rhiannon are nowhere to be seen. There's some kind of implied mistake that Willow might have made that has destroyed his confidence, which is why that's why that is going to be a revisitation of his original character arc, finding that confidence. Yes. And it makes sense that he can't trust Allura because of those trust issues, or because of all of that trauma he's endured.
Right.
Whatever that might be, it has led him to reading Allura's boldness and kind of maybe even naivete as kind of like a factor in why he can't trust her with the wand. But it's also true that Allura's boldness, multiple times so far, from Valentine to the barrier to the High Tower, her boldness has caused her to put herself in essentially in peril.
Right.
So, it's not entirely unjustified that Willow is kind of hesitant to trust Allura completely. But, I couldn't help myself ultimately being happy later on in the episode when Elora does steal the wand from Willow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it kind of like, you know how like when we were prepping, we were talking about like how this whole episode, be it filler, or although it be filler, it was really a lot about like all the different relationships of all the different characters of the party and other characters, and how, you know, what that dynamic is. And as we find out later, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more in depth, but like for Willow, not only is it a protective thing, but also like maybe building, if not complete walls, but definitely a slight border between him and Elora, for that respect, that like maybe jealousy. The fact that he in his heart thinks and believes that he's a hack, and how it comes so naturally to Elora, you know?
Absolutely, absolutely. And he also doesn't mention that he sees, like Elora asks him, "Have you ever seen me in your Denivations?" Or
Yeah.
Anyway, have you seen me? And he won't answer her. So he doesn't mention that he sees Elora die.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I could understand his hesitancy, especially Elora being so young and so. I hate to say, what's the right word?
Just inexperienced, maybe.
Yeah, and young. You know, it's definitely like you don't want to put that much like precognitive weight on a child. You know,
right? Well, and the fact that you don't want to, like, because you see such life and drive and I don't know, like what else, but you want to protect them, but also you don't want to protect them so much that you snuff that you know, joie de vivre, you know, like you want them to have that. You don't want to take that. Yeah, you don't want to take that away from them. You want to nurture that, but how do you protect it and nurture it at the same time?
Yeah,
that's a hard thing.
You know, I think Willow comes off as a little curmudgeon-y, a little insulting, but in a lot of ways, he's not necessarily incorrect to distrust Elora, given, you know, that her motivations don't necessarily always they show her inexperience, essentially. And it's frustrating for him additionally, because he's been kept from being able to instruct Elora for 20 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and he's like, "Oh shit, where do I start? Oh, now she's doing. Oh god damn it! Now I can't. Oh, how do I? I gotta. But before she does this, yeah."
So from there we go to Graydon and Borman's very cringy discussion of women like they aren't people. It shows you the difference between thirsty and horny, where horny is Graydon, thirsty is Borman. I don't have thoughts on this that are nice. We don't need to get into it.
Okay.
Unless you feel free if you'd like to, but I will just, yeah.
Yeah, I think Graydon is coming from a natural inquisitiveness that, you know, everybody feels regardless of gender or non-gender. And yeah, and then I mean, of course Thraxis feels like he probably has to look good in front of a young youth asking for advice, you know, that, but other than that's the only commentary I have on that.
Yeah. I thought that was weird. Like, Graydon is desperate for attention. It's in his backstory. It's in his character.
Absolutely.
And he is taking Elora's like basic kindness and like the minimal amount of attention that she has paid to Graydon, while also over and over saying that she loves loves Eric.
Right.
And Graydon taking that and thinking, well, maybe I have a chance. It's internet level fucking pathetic. Yeah. Other than that, yeah, we go right from there to Borman seeing the signs of the Bone Reavers and kind of trying to very, very smartly tries to de-escalate a fight before it starts. You know, he doesn't want the party stabbing a Bone Reaver or vice versa, it being a bloodbath. You know, so he kind of precedes the tension. I thought that was actually not a bad bit of a bad moment. You know, I thought that was played fairly well.
I think I think they broadcast that early on because, like, clearly he knew something about it. Mm-hmm. Like, even as they were entering the forest right away, they were like, "Oh," he was like, even before Willow suggested they go into the forest, he knew that Willow was going to suggest it, and he knew that he would have to deal with the fact that the Bone Reavers are in there. He knows them. He has a history with them. And how is he going to fucking de-escalate this and make it so that, you know, so that nobody gets hurt, right?
Exactly. It's a great moment for Borman. I like that the way that they did that. You know, and it really leads us into the Bone Reaver camp without too much delay, while also seeming very natural to the storytelling.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting.
Right on.
It's interesting that as they capture them, as they capture them and take them into the thing, into their dwelling there, that they're captured, but nobody's tied up. Like, they don't tie anybody up. They're just like, all right, single file line, follow us, yada yada yada.
Yeah.
That's very, like, odd. You know, I normally, if you're captured, like, for, you know, another Lucasfilm property, even the Ewoks tie up Han Solo and Chewbacca and everybody and fucking put them on a spit to take them into the village. So, like, they're not gonna, you know, risk that.
Sure, yeah. It is kind of telling of who the Bone Reavers are. You know, not wanting to put people in chains is something that will thematically kind of come up shortly. So head into the Bone Reaver camp. Lovely little bits of business here and there. We find out a little bit more. I mean, we find out a little bit more about Borman, mostly. Him and Scorpia's back and forth that we saw in the trailer, kind of given more detail, a little bit more life. And I didn't think that was necessarily very. I didn't have necessarily too much to say about it. I thought it was nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We also learned about Skellen. Actually, I guess that's one thing I could talk about. We find out a little bit about the troll prison in the Dread Mines known as Skellen. I have a lot of thoughts about this. First of all, who the fuck are the trolls running a prison for? Just the trolls? Why aren't the trolls eating or killing the people? Because they're trolls is the thing.
Right.
Are they, I don't necessarily understand the motivations there. Maybe we'll find, I mean, obviously we're going to Skellen next episode, which is why they're kind of like foreshadowing it here.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, it's very confusing who they're running this prison for.
Well, also, I'm wondering, like, what else do we know? Like, where else have we heard of mines where people are just sent to fucking because they can't pay for their farms or, you know, whatever, or their seed. So, like, it sounds like maybe the trolls run the mines that the Nelwyn's were sent to, you know?
Sure. But Bad Morta was running those mines. Have the trolls?
Okay.
Do they not know that? I mean, Bad Morta was. Yeah, I mean, effectively working through levels of deception. Yeah.
Yeah, it's 20 years later, so maybe now the trolls took over the mines. Who knows?
Sure. Yeah. To what end? We will probably find out next episode.
Yes.
We know that Mad Mardigan, that Borman, and a third character, Allagash. As well as maybe any number of Bone Reavers that without names went into those mines, and only Borman has ever come out. We do know that Allagash is the name of the character that Christian Slater played.
Yep, absolutely. And now we know that Borman hopes he died and hopes he was tortured before he died.
Yes.
And also just based on other advertisements for Willow that and interviews and things like that, we know that Allagash was a friend of Mad Mardigan's.
Mhm.
So maybe they were brother squires of Mad Mardigan, vying for his favor. You know, like I don't know, like somehow they all three knew each other. They both loved Mad Mardigan, and they didn't like each other for whatever reason.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously, I think, yeah, again, more foreshadowing for what's to come in the next episode.
Definitely.
Very, very interesting stuff. Very curious to see where it goes. I was going to say, yeah, Kit is kind of shown to develop a little bit by trying to use essentially what is her royal privilege to save her friends in this situation. My mom will, reward you or whatever. Just let us go.
Tries to negotiate.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about the development of Kit is that her like perspective, her kind of realist kind of perspective, her self-awareness is kind of part of what makes her such a kind of angry person. We see that she is not necessarily, as naive as some of the other characters in the show. She seems to, if she's not necessarily correct very often, but she is developing that level of kind of like that understanding of mortality, the kind of the quest that she thought she was on is not the quest that she's on. This is a very different version of events than fighting the soldiers of Nockmar on a snowy mountain or getting in a fist fight in a tavern. This is a very different thing. Obviously in both cases lives were at stake, but this isn't just some story being told to her by her father. This is real life, and the people you care about are in danger. And that being such an important theme in the original Willow, the idea that Willow leaves the village almost predominantly because he knows that if he doesn't, there won't be anyone able to stand up to the tyranny of Bavmorda. He won't be able to. No one won't be able to keep that tyranny outside, out of sight, out of mind. Eventually, it will come to them. It's already coming to them, and that very real threat is something Willow has to contend with as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So, brownies. I hated it. Absolutely nothing.
Really?
I don't know. First of all, Rule turned into a conservative divorce court dad. What the fuck? Every joke he makes me fucking cringe. I didn't think anything was funny about it. It was like it was written by Gutfeld or fucking Jeff Dunham or some shit. I hated it.
Okay.
It is rude for Willow to assume that all brownies know each other. Ganoush is fucking correct. Absolutely correct.
I agree.
Dumb luck provides him with the antidote to that. Is just telling of what the show's creators think about people calling out that kind of ignorance. It's some kind of facade. It's some kind of a misplaced kind of thing that it shows a lack of understanding in real world struggles, a absence of the reality that marginalized people do face. And I don't think it's something that Willow would have actually made the mistake in thinking, as a character, as depicted in the film, at least.
Okay.
Sorry, that's my take on it. Feel free to assert your own.
No, I'm okay.
um, yeah, the lines like he wants her to get a job, and all these kids want to be famous. Artists, actors, uh, trying to tell people watching the show, the audience, that they shouldn't pursue a career in the arts. That's not what artists are supposed to do. It's pretty gross, actually. I think someone should have been told that before they actually put it into a script. Yeah. Yeah, and worse off. Brownies are worse off in this depiction of them than in the film. We know that the brownies are looked at as pests in the original film, but it doesn't seem like my hopes that some kind of systemic changes coming to Anduin would have uplifted the brownies from having to depend on Sherlindria and her grove for protection. Also, just like if we're going to get into the geography of this world, like it seems like Rule is saying that the Bone Reavers moved in right on top of them. Of course, Sherlindria is gone. So my assumption is that they're saying that this used to be Sherlindria's grove, and that the Bone Reavers essentially moved in right on top of them.
Right. I don't know. I didn't know that they like hinted at the fact that she was gone.
Oh, this was in like episode 1 or 2 when talking about the barrier. Fin Raziel and Sherlindria used their powers to develop the barrier.
Right.
So like.
Yeah, but just because they use their powers doesn't mean they're gone. I mean, Fin Raziel probably gone because she's old AF, but Sherlindria is more of a eternal sort of presence, I believe. And the fairies are still there.
Go back and watch episode 1, but I can't quite remember exactly how Sorsha puts it, but I feel like in her talk about the barrier with Kit or somebody, she talks about the fact that they like use the remainder of their magic or something like that, some kind of sacrifice on both of their parts to protect Alora effectively.
I'll have to go back and review that.
But yeah, it's all I'm saying is that they've abandoned the burrow and are instead living in these fairly cool looking accommodations built into a cliff face, but also like just like I don't understand if that's what they're trying to say. If they're trying to say this used to be Sherlindria's grove and the brownies or the Bone Reavers moved in right on top of them, it's unclear if Rule already left Sherlindria's grove and established this place long before the Bone Reavers moved in or what. But we do know the Bone Reavers have been around for, as long as in the 20 years since the climax of the film,
Yeah, how old was Kale? He was the first Bone Reaver. When did he establish them? And like clearly he was like the typical boorish soldier who raped and pillaged. Like I'm sure his 15 children had more than one mother, of course.
Yes. Yeah,
so that's kind of ambiguous as far as how long have the Bone Reavers been active and doing shit.
Yeah, I definitely am going to talk. We'll definitely get more into that because I have a lot of thoughts on that where that's concerned. But just to summarize, I just feel like if you look at the function that of any of that scene with Rule and Willow, it's narratively functionless. It does nothing. It's a nothing scene, nothing sequence that changes nothing about the narrative, adds no depth to Graydon or to Willow. I think the most you could say about it doing that would be, Rule saying that Graydon is the new Franchine and Rue, which I thought was kind of a cute line, but like, I just didn't like. It wasn't funny. Like none of that scene hit me in a way that made me go, "Haha, this is funny." I think if you ask yourself what made any of those jokes funny, you're gonna come up with more question marks than answers. My personal take. I do. There is half a moment where Willow and Graydon are actually kind of communicating before he sees the brownies, and I think some of that, could have been touching if they hadn't decided to go the nostalgia route and actually spent a little bit more time talking about the responsibilities of being on this quest. Graydon and his need and desire for attention and affection, what that means about him, why, maybe Willow finding out how much King Hastur fucking dislikes his own son, and that being some really good meaty shit they could have written about, but fucking didn't for nostalgia, and fuck them.
Yeah, I think I agree with the fact that they could have done that then, but I don't think they trust each other enough to really divulge and get into that until after the truth plums. You know what I mean?
No, I do appreciate a little bit more of that openness there. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're building up to it.
Yeah, they're building to it. Is it okay if we backtrack just a moment? Because there was something like just before we started today, I was rewatching it, and something that I saw that I was like, oh, So
yeah, absolutely.
Back to when Borman and Scorpio were talking about his mistake, and clearly the narrative was slanted toward Borman being, the dashing sort of hero type person that escaped the mines and all that, or escaped from his shackles and all that sort of stuff. But the visuals were showing what really happened.
Yeah, it's a pretty fantastic sequence with the skill and deception.
Yeah, but here's the thing that I noticed. I was like, just from what he was saying and what they were showing, he said something about he was eventually, like, after the Death Dealers, eventually he and then they show like what he was saying, or showed what was happening, and it was clearly, I don't think it was the Tirazline soldiers, it was the Galadorn soldiers came in and arrested him. And then he talked about how eventually Sorsha negotiated for him to be imprisoned in Tirazline, and then he negotiated to be released. Now, up to this point, I had assumed that he had been in the Tirazline prison for a long time, because he looked like he had been there for a while when we first saw him in the first episode. Having said that, now I'm not so sure, because when we first saw him in the first episode, maybe they had negotiated it, and since they were bringing the Prince of Galadorn, yada yada yada, to be betrothed and all that sort of stuff and be married, they actually brought him with them, and then he had maybe that sort of gives a good explanation as to why Sorsha was so ready to let him free, to help find her son, and also why, maybe they hadn't talked in a long time, and she knew him and was asking for his advice because he was Madmartigan's squire and knew Madmartigan well, So I was just like, oh, that was a little tidbit. I was like, oh shit, never thought of that about that without this little bit of information.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way. It's totally possible Sorsha just got Borman into custody as the procession from Galadorn goes into Tirazline, and possibly might have been part of Sorsha's negotiations with King Hastur about marrying Kit to Graydon.
Yeah, totally.
Because she obviously isn't thrilled about it, the way that she talks to Borman about, I think she calls Graydon a mouse or something like that.
Yeah.
In the first episode.
Yeah.
So she doesn't seem necessarily super pleased about it, but she does obviously seem to trust Foreman, and I was wondering why that might be. And what you're saying actually makes all of that make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because to me, totally, it didn't make any sense at all until just that moment. I was like, oh, okay. Little light bulb moment for me. They don't happen often, but they do happen.
No, it's a great take. Yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way, but it makes so much more sense than the opposite to the way that I'd been imagining it.
Yeah. So what's next? So we
we were getting through the brownie stuff. You're getting through Kit and Alora freeing themselves from behind that funky skull prison that they were being kept in.
Yeah.
I do like that Alora steals the wand, like I was saying earlier. It does. My first impression watching that scene was just like, how fucking high is Alora right now? The way that she starts off that scene is just like, oh man, peace and love, bro. Like absolute, like cranked out hippie.
It reminds me of, sorry to cut in, it reminds me of, again, we talked last episode about, just briefly about the magicians, and when they go to Fillory, and like later on in the books and in the show, you find out that the atmosphere of Fillory is like, I can't remember, it's a certain percentage of like cocaine or opium.
Okay, yeah, I vaguely remember this, yeah.
And so it's like that forest atmosphere is like, it's like 15% opium. And so, but I think it's like, I think especially it hits Alora hard because she like instinctually, if not actually, remembers, in her subconscious, oh yeah, this is where I met Sherlindria. This is where I had a big awakening. And she sees the fairies, and all that sort of stuff. Like just as because everybody does, as they're going into, I'm assuming they're fairies and not just fireflies. But yeah, so yeah, it has that effect. And she's like, ooh, I feel like I feel like a happiness buzz, like just elation and whatnot.
Yeah, I think, especially on my first watching, that was definitely kind of like the vibe I thought they were going for. It didn't necessarily like really get there for most of the characters, but definitely for Alora, it definitely kind of has that feeling. Although I do think Kit is overreacting to her feelings about what they might do to Jade. I mean they're using this as a narrative tool. I don't necessarily think it's the best way they could have done it, but I do kind of understand, them getting out was important to Jade, having that moment with Scorpia that we're going to get into in a minute. And I love that Alora kind of just fucking lets Kit have it after she has this kind of moment of love is the most powerful force in the universe, man, kind of moment. She's like, she goes from that to, I feel sorry for Jade. I feel sorry for her because she loves you and you can't love her back, and that is like one of the most cutting things you could possibly say.
Yeah, totally.
Absolutely destroys her. Alora takes control of that situation as well, using she's stolen the wand and she is giving Kit a way to essentially do what Kit wants, which is free her girlfriend. And I think that it's a good moment for the development of Alora. In fact, I think I was saying earlier, this is mostly Jade's episode, and I do still think that, but this is also in part Alora's episode, where she gets to really step into her own power and things like that we've been talking about for the course of this whole show.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's definitely clear examples throughout the episode of Alora stepping into her power, and not just not in a bookwise sort. It's just a natural feel for it. Like it's just born in her, you know, it's right there. And all she just has to react on her instincts. It's instinctual. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. They do the gate. They break out of prison. They free Jade, and Jade gets into a fight with Scorpia after everyone is recaptured.
Oh yeah.
And then Scorpia sees the brand on the back of Jade's neck, and the fight stops. And we get to some very interesting territory where Jade is revealed to be Kale's daughter, Scorpia her sister, and
2 of 15 children.
Yeah, 15 children. It's not clear. And in fact, it's kind of alluded to by, like, when I'm talking about my mother or my father with a sibling, I say dad. You know, it's not my dad or your dad. In fact, I remember when I was a kid, it used to kind of bother me when kids would say stuff like that, like to their siblings, like put it like in the possessive and rather than the general.
Well, I agree with you too. Like, I picked up on that because she says your mother, not our mother.
Right.
Not our mother, you know?
So it's implied that they are potentially the products of sexual assault. It's revealed that Kale led the slaves of Galadorn. Morta essentially giving them making a pact with them, making an agreement with these people, these enslaved people of the kingdom of Galadorn, and offers them effectively their freedom in exchange for fighting against the people oppressing them, the people who've enslaved them.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot to say about this. It's very upsetting, but I don't want to. I do want to save a lot of this for the end of the program.
Right.
But yeah, it goes without saying that this is in world a very intense topic. This is a shattering of Jade's entire worldview. Her surrogate father, very well likely being one of the people who kidnapped her from her family, erased her identity, and participated in a kind of cultural and identity kind of erasure of Jade and her and her people's history.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this is a difficult thing for Jade to take as a character.
Which, strangely enough, she weathers pretty well, like, or at least on the surface, like later on where she's happy and partying and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like, it seems like it would take a lot more out of her than it actually does on screen, you know?
Honestly, it's good that you point this out, because it kind of just goes to show that they weren't really, like, I don't believe the writers, the directors, the showrunners, anyone contacted any kind of sensitivity reader, any kind of consultant. I didn't see anything like that in the IMDb credits. And it shows, because this is not something you can just throw out there and have it not be something that deeply affects these characters, especially in how the information is presented to us. It's really upsetting, and I don't think they handled it responsibly, even in the slightest. I think that this could have been done a lot better. And I do want to talk more about this, but we've gotten through the meat of that. The history of, or the cultural and historical erasure, the taking away of Jade's autonomy, her ability to even make a choice about who she wants to be. It highlights Sorsha's tendency towards being the same kind of fucking oppressive force in the world as her mother, and being completely unaware of that, making justifications for her actions like protection and things like that. I think it is it's something that I went back and looked into in the previous episodes and wanted to kind of like see where Sorsha was at with a lot of these things. And I was reminded, rewatching these episodes, that when Sorsha is first bringing up the Bone Reavers to King Hastur, they're talking about the raids. They're talking about raids on settlements. I kind of I'm not sure if it's abundantly clear, but talking about settlements across Anduin by Galadorn and by Tyr Sleen implies a colonial and empirical kind of power that they are exerting on the world outside of the barrier they established. This is another example of how, of how Sorsha is, fundamentally a harmful force in this world, and we're being offered no explanations,
I vaguely remember the conversation. It is like in the first episode, right?
Yes.
I vaguely remember that, but I don't remember whether they were talking about the raids being Tyr Sleen and Galadorn raiding settlements or the Bone Reavers raiding settlements.
The Bone Reavers were raiding settlements.
Okay.
Settlements that they established. The Bone Reavers, the Bone Reavers were the ones that the Bone Reavers were raiding.
They were the aggressors. Okay.
I could talk about that all day, and in fact, we're going to talk a little bit more about it later, like I was been saying. But we're going to move through the rest of this episode, which luckily there isn't too much more to cover. Graydon and Willow are given some direction by Rule on how to get out of there. It's not very clear what that is or looks like. They kind of stumble out into the middle of the Bone Reavers camp to find themselves in the middle of a party. Laura comes out to reveal that Jade is a Bone Reaver. To Willow, to Graydon, the revelation doesn't necessarily like hit them super hard. It's just time to party now.
I do like just a moment. Like I do like the little sort of interchange that they have before Elora comes out, because Graydon's like, "Well, if you cast some sort of a spell of invisible," I can't remember the exact line, but like, have you made us invisible? He's like, "No, I think what's really happening is because we're small, they're not noticing us," which draws your attention to the marginalization of short people, which I can relate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think it was, it's said kind of as a joke, but not really. Like Willow, he kind of deadpans it like he's very serious, and he's dealt with this his entire life, and he's learned how to use that as an advantage, sort of a thing. While we're on that little subject, sorry, not little subject, but I noticed this earlier on in the episode, and I want to keep this in the spirit of like, I always watch fantasy in the spirit of how is this D&D sort of related and stuff like that. But clearly from the fight at the very beginning to like the various other things that happen, and like the Willow's confession later on in the episode, he is a sorcerer. He may not have progressed as quickly and as far as he would have liked to, but he's gained something even better, which is the fact that I think in the D&D world, he would be a multi-class sorcerer artificer, because he uses not only his magic, but he uses his magic and his sleight of hand and his mechanical engineering ability to engineer shit like that fucking flamethrower that he had at the beginning of the episode and stuff like that. So I really like that aspect of Willow's character. He uses what he has to get the job done. And even though he has these feelings of inferiority, probably deep feelings based on like the shit that's gone on and the things they allude to with, the fact that Kaya and Rhiannon are not there. But he still uses what he has, all of his resources to do what he needs to do to get the job done. So anyway, it just reminded me of that little bit, and I really liked that part.
I liked the I like a romantic kind of B side or B story in a fantasy. Oh,
Absolutely.
Me. I'm a big fan. And so I like this end of the episode because everyone kind of gets to experience some kind of love and affection. Graydon in a very platonic way with Willow. And Borman with Scorpia. Of course, the Jade and Kit relationship. All of these things get touched on in this end of this episode. And it was really nice actually seeing Borman get to, after taking the truth lumps, be honest, be genuine for potentially the first time in this entire show.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really sweet way of kind of like alluding to, it's not at all the same, but like where Borman says, Scorpia says, I could keep you as prisoner, kind of playfully. Borman responds, I already am your prisoner, I thought that was like almost similar to the way that Mad Mardigan says, I serve the Nelwyn.
Yeah.
It's not the same, but it's kind of it's kind of a little bit the same. But yeah, I thought that was a nice moment, and really kind of shows you more of who Borman is as a character behind all of the defenses and things of that nature.
Yeah.
I did really like Graydon and Willow kind of being able to be open and talk to each other. Willow kind of telling us about his, I don't want to believe that Willow isn't a powerful sorcerer. I want to believe that Willow doesn't think he's a powerful sorcerer. I guess that's just, my own, like, petty disagreement with the narrative until otherwise corrected. But yeah, it kind of breaks my heart that, Willow had, Finrazel's Book of Magic, and had 20 years, became the High Alduin, and still is kind of like okay at sorcery. I don't know. I don't like that. It's just my own personal opinion.
I think he's like, honestly, I think he's better than he thinks he is. It's that
right
classic trope. He's better than he thinks he is, and the fact that he doesn't believe that he is the reason why he is able to wield the power that he does.
I really hope that's the way they're going. Yeah.
Even though he doesn't know he has that power, like I feel, and it also, it allows that character to draw from other sources besides that just raw natural power, like just raw natural power is boring,
Yeah.
And yeah.
It avoids like Willow is really smart in that it avoids a chosen one narrative. Of course, Allura is the chosen one in the original film, but she's not performing great acts of magic to be the single-handed, like, Luke Skywalker end of tyranny. She is a symbol. Like all of the other characters in the original film are more symbols than they are characters. Only kind of given life by these incredible performances and the solid writing that comes from the original film. We are getting hints of it. Let me be more fair. We're getting some of it, but I do feel like it's missing out on a lot of the radical themes and symbolism in favor of a more morally gray, ethically ambiguous kind of statements. You know, it's more of a modern convention for pulp genre fiction than what I think was happening more often during previous eras of fantasy and science fiction, especially where it comes to Pat Morta. I don't think that's responsible at all. I mean, I've had my critiques on a lot of these shows that, you know, tell us this person is a bad person, but here they are feeding a homeless person. You know, that's so nice. Maybe they're not so bad. I think that's irresponsible. Fuck.
Or is it propaganda?
It is. It's exactly propaganda. Yeah, I did want to say, I really hope Laura Graydon doesn't happen. And I know that sounds kind of weird, because I just talked about how much I love romance in a fantasy. I think that it can be done really beautifully. But as I mentioned earlier, Graydon is not working from a place of even self-understanding. His lack of affection in childhood, his childhood traumas, all of these things are going to get in the way of him having any kind of real meaningful relationship if he's not working through them. And I don't feel like him or Laura like really are like the connection doesn't hit for me just generally. I think that it's much more of a friendship connection, and I hope that that's the way the show eventually goes with it. I hope that they use this for Graydon's growth, learning to not be so desperate for attention, to not pine for somebody who is obviously and over again stating, I love this other person, that is a waste of your time, your energy, and is troubling. You're not looking at Laura like she's a human being with her own ability to make choices and decisions for herself. If you're just trying to supersede the relationship, the love that she has stated she feels for this other person.
Right.
Maybe they're setting this up. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, like, clearly, I mean, even though, like, this is 20 years later from the film, like, most of these people are 20 years old, give or take a few years. Aside from Borman, every single one of these characters have arrested development. They haven't had the experience, and so regardless of their age, they're going through things that you would go through at 10, at 20, you know, like at various ages that, you know, you start to discover they have no experience in this, except for, you know, Eric, who hasn't been on screen very much. And, you know, clearly he's precocious in those matters. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just, I want them to be friends, platonic friends. I want them to be able to learn from each other. I want Graydon to move on and maybe like participate in these training sessions that Alora and Willow are going through. Maybe contribute to them. Graydon obviously has knowledge that Willow might not have, and vice versa. They could learn from each other, and I want that to be part of his growth.
Absolutely.
We're 3 episodes from the finish, though, and we still have like close to 20 characters, I think, that haven't been introduced to this story yet. So I'm very, very doubtful that we're going to get satisfying conclusions to most of this stuff. But that's its own bag of worms we don't have to get into.
On the assumption that they're not going to get a second season, right?
Huh?
That's operating on the assumption that they're not getting a second season.
True. I'm just saying by the end of this season, that's where we're at. We're going to get a lot of cliffhangers, a lot of uncompleted threads on this, on the story we're being told so far. And who knows how long and if we will get a second season.
Yeah.
So, yeah, kind of anxiety inducing a little bit.
Okay.
You know, especially given the gravity, a lot of these storytelling tropes, these narrative functions, the weight that they genuinely really have in like how we as an audience are made to feel about them. You know, do. But that being said, I do really like that Laura is firm that she is not giving this wand back to Willow. This is her wand.
Yeah.
And it is interesting looking up a little bit of the going through this episode, doing research. I was reminded that I think it's the Wayland True, it could be the source book, but I think it's in the Wayland True novelization that it's said that Finn Rizal once sought Sherlindria's wand before she was turned. After Babmorda's kind of machinations started becoming apparent to Finn Rizal, she reached out to Sherlindria to try and get the wand and was denied it. Sherlindria didn't feel she was ready, didn't feel she would be ready for this wand. And because of that, she loses to Babmorda, and everything happens ultimately because of this maybe misjudgment in character, but hard to say. It also could have resulted in, Finn Rizal still losing and Babmorda ending up with the wand.
Right. It could totally be a Frodo situation. Gandalf can't have the ring. Nobody can have the ring but that one person, Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So I did like that. Unfortunately, we're going to get back into this kind of troubling slave narrative and fantasy and the how that reflects on Jade and Kith's relationship. I think it's really impossible to separate the two, knowing what we know now.
Before we do that, is it okay if I circle back to one small element?
Oh, please.
There's that moment in the party where Graydon decides he wants to get a shave, and they shave him and all that sort of thing, and they make some comments about it, he's like, do you think she'll like it? And they're like, who? And he's like, this just some girl. He's like, girls like beards, or ladies like beards, or something like that. And he's like, well, but he doesn't have a beard. And he's like, well, he doesn't have a girlfriend. That part, possibly, I don't know if it's intentional or not, but alluding to the fact that maybe that guy that doesn't have a beard is openly gay. The other thing being that, they're just doing some normal teasing like people will do to other people when they make a huge change, and just giving them a hard time because, clearly they haven't had a long amount of time together, but they've got the truth plums. So they're being honest and not necessarily malicious about their honesty. And so I feel like the truth plums have accelerated their camaraderie, and they're giving each other a hard time like people normally would do if they've been with each other for a long time. So there's that. And also, I love that article that you sent us about the fact that, there's a practical reason for him being shaved, and they probably just threw it in at the last minute. The fact that Tony, the actor, actually was doing another film and he had to shave for that film. So they just, instead of being like, all right, let's do prosthetic beard and deal with all that bullshit, let's just write it into the story and everything like that. And I'm wondering, was it maybe the third installment of the Spider-Man movies, or something like that?
Yeah, I have no clue. But I do. I had my issues with that whole scene. I liked Laurie. I thought Laurie was kind of sweet and maybe a little bit fruity.
I like it a lot.
But I did. I just want anybody watching this to know that, not every woman likes a beard, and you don't have to prove your masculinity by being able to grow one. So if you're a young dude or someone who can't grow facial hair and wants it, don't feel bad about yourself, because that's kind of what this show unintentionally, or probably unintentionally, is doing here. It needed to happen to address the fact that for that scene coming up, Laura would be seeing Graydon without a mustache, and that had to be addressed in some way. I don't know if that's the best way they could have done it. In fact, I'm almost certain that it is not. But that's me. But I think we have to talk about when Jade and Kit finally get a little bit of alone time for the first time, and Kit makes some mistakes. Sorsha being Kit believing that Sorsha, her mother, did all of these things to protect Jade and then keeping that from her. That's troubling. It implies that there's a certain amount of Kit understanding the ramifications for that truth being told. Kit having some awareness of the fact that it would be really difficult for her to continue building a relationship with this person, how much their trust would be put into question if she found out that her mother was literally made her a servant instead of giving her the free life as a bone reaver that she could have had. Taking her history, her autonomy away, all of these things definitely would factor into their relationship, and given the fact that, I mean, she's literally Kit's best friend, also instructor, also a servant of her family. Jade didn't have to be a servant. She could have lived a free life with the Bone Reavers. That being taken away by Kit's mother. And Kit having any knowledge of that happening and not telling her. This is a thing that happens in abusive relationships. So not necessarily this specifically, but keeping that kind of information because you think it might affect negatively affect your relationship with another person, that is not okay. And her later on, effectively apologizing about my dad killing your dad, Mad Mardigan killing Kale. What the fuck does Jade care? She never met Kale. She remembers her mother being killed. Where's that apology? Why would she not be apologizing for the Palancade's kidnapping of her, erasing her identity? Why wouldn't she be more apologetic about that than some battle that happened before either of them were even fucking born? The care that it deserves. Other than that, basically, we didn't talk about Kit being captured by the trolls, but this is just a foreshadowing into going into Skellen next episode. The trolls run Skellen. Kit gets, yeah.
Yeah, there was at first when I first watched it, I was like, that's random. Troll, why are the fucking trolls in this forest in the Bone Reavers? But when was it? I think it was pretty early on where somebody, I don't know if it was Borman or somebody else, says something about, oh yeah, something got to be aware of the troll raids. And it's just like an aside that one of the characters says, but oh, that's right. It was in the brownies. So there's something of value in what the brownies said. Like Rule just says, oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. Watch out for the troll raids, or there's something about the troll raids here in this forest. So clearly the trolls want to raid often in this forest and steal Bone Reavers to take them back and work in their mines and stuff like that. So that's one of the places where they get slaves to work in their mines. And then, so that sets up at the end when the trolls come and raid the forest, seemingly out of nowhere, but they actually did set that up. So, yeah. It was something I didn't catch on the first watch, but on the second watch, I was like, oh, he said that thing, Mm-hmm. And I don't think none of the main characters, none of the side characters were abducted. I think they basically defeated the trolls and that was it, right? Is that correct? Or yeah. Well, maybe the trolls aren't in the know. Maybe they're just greedy and all about mining their whatever rock or metal they're mining, and they just want money. Maybe the trolls are all
comma
money.
or comma metal.
Yeah. Rock or metal. Oh, I want a metal band with just like a troll metal band. That would be funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's just kind of untouchable and watching, and nothing else is going on in her general like 5-foot square of activity. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was the one thing I noticed about the ending, seemingly random troll raid. But apparently they do that. That's a thing that they do often. And then yeah, I guess that's it because I wrote troll time, and then it's the end.
Yeah. And we know from a little bit of, if you look into a little bit of the backlore, the shadow books definitely talk about there are some trolls that do speak. And Bavmorda would use, I think actually Wayland Drew's book talks about them being part of Bavmorda's servant class. They had, ones that worked in the dungeons. At Nontmar, they had ones that worked in the chambers and in the high tower. So, yeah, I think it's safe to say there will be some kind of deeper explanation for at least some of this. Yeah.
So maybe the trolls at Tira's Lean were the ones that escaped their servitude.
Hard to say. Oops. But yeah, it's hard to say, but it is fairly likely that that many of the trolls who worked for Bavmorda, worked for Nontmar, have retreated to Skellen for safekeeping, maybe to continue mining ore. Although to what end, who knows what they're doing? Maybe they're just building up an armory. Maybe they're who knows? It doesn't necessarily doesn't seem to be necessarily a rhyme or reason for any of this yet. But hopefully, we'll get some more explanations into why necessarily they are mining at Skellen.
Maybe they want to be bankers. They're just mining that gold and silver.
I mean,
set up an economy.
Yeah, I mean, in not an entirely dissimilar way, trolls were mistreated by Bavmorda as well, and used in a kind of magical enslavement, effectively. Trolls were not a huge part of the original story and in the original Willow, but the further you dig into the lore, the more the trolls do kind of have more of a presence. Yeah. So yeah, I as a fan, as a lore nerd, I am excited to see where they're going with all this and what all of it means. But yeah, unclear so far. Yeah, I think long story short, this episode was had some solid moments, a bit of growth for Kit, for Jade, for Laura, for Willow and Graydon. I think all of our main characters learn a little bit about themselves. It is kind of a what's the word, a filler kind of format of an episode. Although I would say that we needed a lot of this character development to take place at some point because it's been pretty piecemeal up till now. We needed an episode somewhat like this, although I think the big counter argument to that is they just fucked it up. They absolutely missed the mark, in my estimation. I think a lot of that development is solid, but I think that it's marred by this very ugly kind of mistreatment of its own material and themes. This was a little much for me. So, stay tuned, because I'm sure we'll have no shortage of hot takes in the next episode as well. It's going to be hard to see how they can kind of introduce this kind of narrative and then not pay it off or give it the just space it deserves within the narrative to exist, without kind of brushing past, the fact that Jade is her being a product of sexual assault, as well as her sister. And this is, I guess the sexual assault angle isn't necessarily 100% clear. It is implied, and it has been implied over and over again within the lore that Kale was not necessarily looking for consent.
Yeah.
Put it lightly. So yeah, I hate to end on such a sour note, but it's not my fault. Blame the show.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Can't wait to see what happens on the next episode, how they pay everything off. If they do over this next episode, or maybe it won't get paid off until the end with another cliffhanger. I feel like that's probably the normal thing for most series and everything like that. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, ding the bell, whatever it is, to continue following us. And if this is your first episode, wow. Go back and check out, all the way to the beginning of Ignore the Bird, Follow the River. We cover all sorts of issues and character deep dives. And come see us next week.